Welcome back to How China Works. I'm Brendan Davis.
And I am Yingying Li.
As we progress through our series here, we will have some shows that are heavy on history, others that are full of personal anecdotes, some that are fairly philosophical, and a handful that are chock full of facts and information. What's today's show about, Yingying?
Well, today's show is looking at Chinese startups and their working culture, but we're not just looking at the present day. We have a look at history of how we got here and why it's so very useful to understand when a particular startup or company was created or came of age. We get into a lot of detail here, and we end by discussing things that the smartest entrepreneurs looking at China should know to best prepare for the future.
This one is so information-dense that we want to get started right away. So in the immortal words of one of the best entrepreneurs on the planet, Richard Branson, screw it, let's do it. Okay, Ying, let's dig in. It's November 27th, 2018 as we release this specific episode. So the year is heading towards a close. What is so significant about 2018 in terms of the startup world?
Well, according to many sources, from the very top on down here in China, 2018 marks a milestone year of change for Chinese entrepreneurship. It's been said that startups are like a growing child, and of course children should grow up not only just physically, but mentally. The best newer companies we have seen the last couple of years have been successful in part because of their refined intellectual approach to their business and the market.
Right. It's not enough anymore to rely on scale to save you in China. You can't just spray and pray your idea or business to the 1.4 billion people here and hope that enough of them accept it and adopt it for you to make it work. You have to be super strategic, not only to survive here, but to even just get a tiny toehold in the first place.
That's right. Let's look at history and culture to explore and understand the different stages of entrepreneurship since the opening up period of China. That's when it all began in the modern era.
One quick note, why are we doing it this way? Well, the answer is very straightforward. We think that this is the best way possible to help our foreign audience better understand things here and to give context for our Chinese audience too.
That's right.
Things are moving so fast that there isn't a lot of time spent looking in the rearview mirror. But knowing the things we're going to cover today can't help but give you an advantage over someone who doesn't have a good grasp of this information. So we'll give you an overview and then put enough meat on the bone to help you make sense of it all. And there are plenty of great resources online to go even deeper wherever you want to.
In China, there have been 5 distinct waves of entrepreneurial development so far. If you understand which wave the founder or company rode in on, you will better understand how things got how they are and how to deal with them. We'll run through the first ones fast to get to the good stuff.
So the first period was in 1984, which was the same year as the last Van Halen record with David Lee Roth, at least in the continuity of records. That gives you a little Western carbon dating context, although I think they peaked with fair warning. But what was significant about that year in China, Yingying?
1984 was just a few years after the opening up had started. This time period was focused on eating, wearing, and using new things. The average person started to become aware of and be able to purchase things like a TV, a wider range of food, and small home appliances to improve their quality of life. Lenovo is the most famous company to emerge from that era, and of course, they're still going today. Pretty impressive.
The second wave was in 1992, which in the West was marked by the mainstream emergence of the band Nirvana and their culture-changing hit Smells Like Teen Spirit. What was in the China airwaves then?
The key person to note here was former leader Deng Xiaoping, the engineer of the opening up of 78. He went to the south of China to encourage people to develop business down there in what's known as the Pearl River Delta.
For people who don't know China geography very well, that's the Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Macau area, all of which are based in or around the water.
Yes, and Deng Xiaoping encouraged the budding entrepreneurs across China to go to the sea or 下海. It was felt that the most opportunity was there, and the most typical play was in real estate. The most famous player back then was Wang Ke, the real estate giant, and they became hugely successful.
As personal property became a thing here, owning your own housing became the chief goal of most people. The Chinese obsession on housing isn't just a financial investment issue either. It goes much deeper. China culturally has more of a land-based focus instead of a mobility focus. Because, lands equal roots, which equals stability, of course. So land ownership, or even just a land lease as is more commonly done here, became attractive for many reasons. But mastery of physical real estate was just the beginning, yeah?
Yeah. that brings us to Wave 3, which started in 1999.
And to keep my musical references theme going, which I landed on kind of accidentally, but hey, I kind of like it, so I'm going with it. I think it's obvious what song I'm going to name check for the year 1999, right?
Hate me, baby, one more time.
For the love of God, Ying, not Britney, no, Prince. Now, of course, that song 1999 did come out in the 80s, but it's the one that I heard the most in 99, I think. But at least you didn't say Sugar Ray.
Hey, I can like what I want. And who's Sugar Ray?
Exactly.
All right, back to our show. 1999 in China marked the beginning of the big era of internet and the rise of BAT, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. Because the internet was a new forward-looking thing, the people best equipped to take advantage of this era were the intellectuals.
Yep, founders could no longer just combine a good idea and the right connections and muscle the market. Entrepreneurship started being led by people with high education, high vision, and a lot of foreign travel experience. And this wasn't just for the academic advantages, although those were the prime drivers at first. It was to develop cultural intelligence. Hey, that's your specialty, Ying-Ying.
Yeah.
And that's something that those D&G doofuses could have used a little bit more of last week, too.
Yeah, talk about shocking. I have no official comments.
No doubt.
In 1999, though, leaders of the day went overseas to get world smarter. It became widely understood that knowledge really is power. So getting as much of it as you could and in many different places and ways as possible became a top goal.
This also helps explain why the pay-for-knowledge model is so accepted here in the present day, as people see that knowledge truly changes your fate. But that's getting ahead of the story. More on that in another episode. For now, though, let's talk about entrepreneurship Wave 4.
Wave 4 began in the year 2007. It's only just ending now. It was kicked off by Apple, the iPhone, which brought the mobile internet era to people worldwide.
For sure. Early adopters in the West and elsewhere who could afford it might have had a Nokia 9000. That was the very first mobile phone with true internet access, as far back as 1996, actually. Or a little bit later, the T-Mobile Sidekick, or the later generation Palm Pilots or BlackBerry devices in the late 90s, early 2000s also had mobile access. But the iPhone was the game changer. And for China, the mobile internet itself was most people's very first exposure to it.
Even today, not everyone wants or can have a PC, but everyone wants a mobile.
Exactly. The success of the iPhone led to both high-end knockoffs and the development of the Android platform, as well as cheaper alternatives for people who either couldn't afford an iPhone or had some pathological aversion to Apple, which I don't understand.
Yes, and along with the modern and more affordable smartphones came Didi, Meituan, Momo, Meitu, Ele.me, Dianping, etc. It became the app era.
Don't you mean APP?
No, Brandon, no, I don't, because I live in Silicon Valley.
Fair enough.
Okay, now we will teach you several phrases to help you become China smarter. The first is 人口红利. It refers to achieving success through the benefits of societal scale.
Think of it as a demographic dividend or a population bonus. The idea is that a huge market by itself can lead to quick growth if everything lines up just right otherwise.
人口红利 led to the so-called instant business model, where if the word of mouth is good, everyone will want it and share quickly, and then the business or app grows rapidly. Think Taobao.
And despite all the cash and prizes this era brought, it's time for the bad news. This moment is pretty much now past in China. For real?
For real, it has ended, as we have almost reached the market saturation in most areas, and now we are waiting for this new fifth wave we are entering to really define itself.
And while this one is still incubating, we do have one moment in the middle to look at here. Maybe call it Wave 4A or something, dated September 2014. What happened then, Ying?
That's when Premier Li Keqiang announced that China would have a new wave of embracing entrepreneurship and innovation. This is called 大众创业,万众创新, or 双创. Everybody talks about this in China since then.
Yeah, that speech and the comments that followed up on it were sort of the last days of disco for the period that just passed. For instance, there are some great accelerators and incubators out there, including one run by a friend of ours, but versions of them popped up seemingly everywhere there was a tax break or incentive to do so, and since they were too often run by people who had little to no idea what they were doing, they failed miserably.
Yeah, tons of people bluntly say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur.
Yay!
Without thoroughly reflecting on what that really meant. So lots of them have been abandoned. There are lots of cultural reasons for this beyond the financial ones too, which is what we will look at next.
Sounds good. Let's start with the key differences in U.S. versus Chinese approaches to entrepreneurship.
Okay, to begin, In China, the main purpose of most startups has been to create fortune versus to create a world-changing impact, like so many notable startups in the United States. Part of this is because the per capita education levels are still very different. In China, most people are still trying to establish themselves, so they often choose the safe route instead of being bold. Being fast is valued over being better, and there's more of the tendency to follow versus lead here.
On a semi-personal note, I do have some nightmare stories from the entertainment business about so-called investors' tolerance for failure. So not to tangent, because I've ranted about this a lot in more appropriate venues, but I'd say that the average risk tolerance level for most wannabe investors is super wuss. Now, yeah, there are all sorts of historical memories to be overcome here, but frankly, it's been long enough that we should really be past those in the cultural conversation. People all too often want guaranteed returns, and they want them almost instantly. The people who understand and can comfortably deploy true at-risk capital, though, i.e. the people we need more of, are the ones who are qualified to reap its rewards. The risk-reward matrix is pretty skewed sometimes, though. Why is that?
Well, there is a heavier emphasis on pragmatic thinking in established markets versus more of a magical thinking one here. This goes back to education differences, but in short, people can get way ahead of themselves here sometimes.
And I thought it was just me. Good to know. So let's look at this new fifth wave we're sort of entering here and see how to best get a handle on it. What's different so far?
Well, for one thing, in the first 4 waves, the era itself would make you a hero. This is called 时代造就英雄. But in the 5th wave, it's said that only after the wave has broken, you can see who is naked.
That's awesome. What is it in Chinese?
Well, in Chinese we say 退潮之后才知道谁在裸泳.
That's pretty awesome. So I'll take your word on that. So that brings us up to 2018 and the reality that the golden era of internet founders has passed. So it's up to you, dear audience, to find out just how deep that water is.
The good news is that it's time for new opportunities. The future is going to be about not only high-tech, but highly integrative and highly global opportunities.
The local market is basically saturated in so many areas that if you want to eat in the new era, you must go global, y'all. Some of the very best areas to look at are in new manufacturing, new logistics, and new retail. And of course, AI, and there's 5G, but hey, you can hear all about that stuff everywhere else. We're trying to bring you the fresh apples, kids.
You also must make something that people truly want. You cannot count on marketing or scale to save you anymore.
No, you can't. And as we put down the landing gear here, it's worth noting a few characteristics of things that aren't likely to change anytime soon, so bear these in mind as you plan your world dominance strategy.
The overall state of the Chinese entrepreneurial approach has both strength and weaknesses. It's the yin and yang in action. An emphasis on speed has its upsides, but also big downsides.
We didn't spend a lot of time talking about the 996 that's in our title here today because it's so well understood in China already. It references a work schedule of working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. But in practice, way too many of my local friends here work something like 9, 11, 6, or 7, depending on their office culture. The concept of work smart, not hard doesn't really fly here.
This is true, but this focus on short-term gains won't help when winter is finally here. We love China, but this has to be said. Our execution here is often excellent, but the planning and operations aspects have room for improvement. Collective thinking helps this focus on execution, but it also leads to a lack of innovation and prevents a wide-scale striving for excellence.
We'll end with a few final bonus tips, especially for our international audience. One is that only by truly understanding Chinese policies, or at least trying to, can you know the real priorities here. But if you manage to do that, you can best target your efforts accordingly to meet them.
And lastly, when brainstorming new ideas, do some serious environmental scanning to see what's actually needed here. There is a massive emerging market in solving social problems, such as dealing with aging population, bridging the gaps between rich and poor, moving away from overconsumption, and handling environmental protection issues.
Indeed. Cross-cultural talents will be needed more than ever in the future to ensure the best collaboration. So we'll be talking about all this for years to come. Thanks, Yingying.
My pleasure.
So I realized that I abandoned my musical theme once things started to get surreal, but much like the ability to throw practically anything at the Chinese market and make it stick, it ran its course. Now it's time for a new game plan.
Today, we look at the historical precedents of entrepreneurship here. We discussed how and why the market developed, examined some of the pros and cons of all of it, and dropped some hints on what we think the future will hold. But hey, what do we know?
Exactly. We did our research. We want to know what you think too. Please visit HowChinaWorksPodcast.com to give us your feedback on this show, suggest topics for future shows, or just to say hi.
Speaking of all the impact that Deng Xiaoping's Southern tour had, tomorrow we'll be back with a deeper look at how to react to policy changes here and in the greater world. I am Yingying Li.
And I'm Brendan Davis. See you tomorrow. Now China Works.